Well, good Sunday evening to you. Switching roles here a little bit. I hope you got to view the service this morning. If you weren't able to be here in person, always enjoy listening to Joshua and having that opportunity. We have both been covering the devotional books this year, and so it makes it kind of easy for us to stay on track here and to stay on a schedule to know what's coming up and to kind of cover different topics as we go through together. And so I hope you enjoyed the lesson this morning on Jesus and the apostles. If you were at the building here this morning, then you were able to listen to Joshua in person, and I know that was a treat as well. Most of you that were here probably know, and maybe all of you know, my father has resigned from full-time preaching. He will do some fill-in and different things, but he has stepped down from the pulpit at the Marietta Church in Marietta, Mississippi, after 25 years of having been with them, about 25 and a half. And so I requested the elders allow me the opportunity to be there with him on this day. And so they granted me that permission. And so the family and I were able to travel down and be with him. At least that's the plan as I record here on Wednesday, trying to make this be real for Sunday evening. But that is the plan, Lord willing, to travel down on Sunday and be with him on his last Sunday there. It's kind of been a whirlwind of emotions for me, and I certainly ask you to keep my daddy and mother in your prayers as they start in this new journey within the ministry of filling in and traveling some. And as a son and as a preacher, selfishly, I look forward to them being able to be here with us at Leoma more. And that's the difficulty of being the son of a preacher, is that your dad is always preaching on Sunday. And so the weekend gatherings that many of you get to have on a normal basis on the weekends are a little different for our family. And so I look forward to the possibility, at least, of my dad not having to be in the pulpit every Sunday and being able to come and visit and spend the weekend with the family here. Just keep him and your mom in your prayers as they go through this transition, if you will. At this point in our year, for those of you that are regular Leoma attenders, you know that I plan a year in advance. And of course, with the year being 2020, we were going to focus on the idea of vision, of being able to see. And so here at Leoma last fall, I passed out some questionnaires and got some topic suggestions and some ideas about some areas where we needed a better vision as a church. I had several, 15 or so things suggested, different topics, different areas. And so I planned out the Sunday evenings together. And by this time in the schedule, we would be in the book of James. And we would be looking at various topics throughout the book of James as it relates to our vision, as it relates to being able to see. And of course, none of us really saw what was coming, did we? And so we didn't know that this year was going to be like this. And it's a reality that we don't know what any year is going to be like until we have lived it. It's easy to look back and it's easy to review history and say, well, now this happened and that happened. And of course, this is going to go this way or that way. But obviously, vision requires us being able to see into the future, and having a vision requires us to be able to plan at a time that we haven't lived in. And so we tried to do that. And as time and circumstance would have it, this is much different than what we envisioned. And so I'm not going to go through a verse-by-verse study of James here this evening. But what I want to do is, for the next few minutes, if you have your Bible and you're able to open with me, I want to look at 4 verses in the book of James. Why these 4, you ask? Well, because they deal with how to deal or how to treat other people. Now, we're living in a world with a virus. Absolutely. The virus is spreading. Thankfully, the hospital rate's not climbing as fast as the case rate's climbing. Thankfully, the death rate's not climbing at the rate that the cases numbers are climbing. But nonetheless, the cases are climbing, the virus seems to be spreading, and there are people you know now that have it. Not just a number in a state somewhere or a particular number within a county. You know, for a long time, the number was the Lawrence County number. And so we had 24, and we had 28, and we had 31 cases. And for a long time, it was just numbers. But now it's people that we know. There's a virus out there. And I don't know that there's very much that any of us can do in terms of stopping the virus. There are things we can do to help stop the spread, sure. And if we get it, there are things that we can do to help combat the symptoms that the virus causes. But I think all of us are powerless when it comes to the ultimate stopping or starting. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want this. And therefore we didn't turn it on. We can't turn it off. And so I'll just be honest with you. For the most part, we're at the mercy of the virus. Let's just call it like it is. And we do the best we can do, and we listen to the recommendations, and we follow the guidelines, and we adhere to the business requirements if they have certain requirements on us if we're going to go in that business, or we stay in the parking lot. But at the end of the day, we're at the mercy of the virus. There's another issue going on in our country right now that I don't think we're at the mercy of. And that is the violence and the inhumane activity that is going on among mankind. And what I mean by I don't think we're at the mercy of that is that I fully believe we can stop that. Now, I don't necessarily mean you or I individually, but we as a humanity, we as a country, we as a society, we as families, we can stop those things. It is not beyond our control to keep people from tearing down statues or from destroying different monuments and different things. It is not beyond our ability to stop people from mistreating others or to cause people to quit grouping up and behaving in an ungodly, unrighteous way. Now, there may be times when we feel like we're at the mercy of that, but that could stop. That is not like the virus. Yet, our society, our culture would want to say, well, we're just at the mercy of, here's what's happened. We have sown wild oats, and that's what we're reaping. But it's nobody's fault but our own. And it's nobody going to stop it but us with the help of God. That's the only way that's going to happen. And it boils down to these 4 verses in the book of James. I've already been studying throughout the whole 5 chapters, and I was ready to preach the 5 chapters. But I just want to point out these 4 verses. Are you ready? Chapter 2 and verse 8. If you really fulfill the royal law according to the Scriptures, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You are doing well. Now, if that's the only one I had, if that was it, right there, 1 verse in the whole 5 chapters of the book of James, that would stop the terrible behaviors that are going on, the ridiculous actions of mankind. The royal law, you say. Oh, the law of Moses. Oh, the Jewish commandments. James says that's exactly right. In the royal law, if you want to hold on to the law, and if you want to be people of the law, and if you want to follow the law, well, here's what it says in the law. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Jesus would say in Matthew 22 to love the Lord your God. He's assuming that you love God, okay? That's assumed that you do love God. So now, the second one, remember Matthew 22, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you understand the value of treating people the way you want to be treated. That's Matthew 7 and verse 12, isn't it? Do you understand that loving your neighbor, you remember Luke 10? Jesus told us who our neighbor was. Remember the Samaritan that stopped and helped the man that was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho? We call him the Good Samaritan. Why? Because he helped a total stranger to get out of a near-death experience. And Jesus said that he done to his neighbor. Who is my neighbor? Love your neighbor. Love them how? James 2 and verse 8. Love them as yourself. You wouldn't harm yourself, would you? You wouldn't hurt yourself. You take care of yourself. You provide for yourself. You see, here's what's happening in verse 9 of James 2. But if you show partiality, they got favoritism going on. And James says there ain't no place for favoritism. No, I agree, there's no place for inequality. There's no place for favoritism. Every person has the same value in the eyes of God, but every person does not have the same role and the same position and the same function within society. Quit telling yourself that lie. We all matter the same to God. Every life matters to God. We are all equal in the eyes of God. Absolutely. But there are people in our world that are in a position of authority that I'm not in. And because of that, I have certain rules of respect and honor and obedience to them that they don't have to me. And that's not about inequality in value. That's about a position of authority that is to be honored and respected. And I love my neighbor as myself. How would I want to be treated if I was in that position of authority? I am to treat them that way. Oh, it's simple. Love your neighbor as yourself. You come to chapter 3 of the book of James. I'm in verse 14 now. James chapter 3 and verse 14. Number 2. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast and be false to the truth. Bitterness and selfish ambition drives a society apart. Bitterness and selfish ambition drives an egocentric society and culture to where it's all about me and I want what I want and I'll step on you to get there. Bitterness says, I'm mad at you because you mistreated my great-great-great-great-grandfather and I'm still bitter about it, and so that gives me permission to behave the way I want to behave now because of something that was done generations ago. Folks, we got a problem. And we've got the answer to the problem. We know how to treat one another. You have to eliminate bitterness and selfish ambition. You show me a society that gets upset and harbors grudges and resentment and is all about trying to fulfill their own desires and wishes and check their own boxes, and I'll show you a society that cannot be anything but divided. There's no way to be united under that system. This is contrary to the royal law in chapter 2 and verse 8 of loving your neighbor as yourself. No, this is about pride. This is about haughtiness. This is about selfish. This is about me and what I want. We need to reprogram our minds and our culture to think about others and to think of others more significant than ourselves, Philippians 2. We are not at the mercy of all of this bickering and bitterness and resentment. No, James says James 3 in this context here, you get heavenly wisdom from above. And let me tell you that this whole bitterness and selfish ambition ain't got nothing to do with wisdom from above. No, it's earthly. It's human. It's demonic. Get rid of bitterness, jealousy, selfish ambition. I come then to chapter 4 of the book of James. I'm in verse 11. Do not speak evil against one another. Wow. Wouldn't you love to live in a society and a culture where nobody said anything bad about anyone else? You find that community and I'll buy a house tomorrow. I don't care what it costs. I'll finance it. After all, mortgage rates are at an all-historical low, right? Find me a house in a society, in a culture, in a community where nobody says anything bad about anybody, and where the internet and the TV and the radio, when something evil is said about somebody else, it filters it out and it don't let it in, and I'll move there tomorrow. I want to go to that place. I'm telling you, we are not at the mercy of this behavior and the way that people are acting. We can fix this. The way we fix it, James 4 and verse 11, do not speak evil against one another, brethren. Don't speak evil. Mama said if you ain't got nothing good to say, you need to listen to Mama and keep your mouth shut. And so do I. If it ain't going to build up, I'm not saying don't say what is true. I'm not saying don't speak the truth. I'm not saying don't say what needs to be said sometimes. But if what needs to be said is the truth, then it's going to not be evil. It's going to be for the good. Now, they may not take it that way. But all of this bitterness and all of this backbiting and all of this evil slandering. You remember Ephesians 4 and verse 31? Put away all malice. Put away all slander. Put away all evil speaking. Put away all anger. Get rid of all that stuff. Oh, that we could live in a society and in a world where no one spoke evil against. As our time quickly slips us here, let's go to the fourth and final one. I'm in James 5 and verse 9. The Bible says, do not grumble against one another, brethren, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. Do not grumble against one another. It's language that suggests that they were already grumbling against one another. It's language that was suggesting that they were already judging and comparing and classifying. Well, I don't have what you have, and because of that, I'm going to grumble about it. I'm going to fuss about it. I'm going to bicker about it. They start classifying themselves. And I'm not being treated the way you're being treated. And so that upsets me. And I'm telling you, we are not at the mercy. We can stop this. The way we stop it, 2 Corinthians 10, is we stop comparing and classifying ourselves together. Be who God made you to be. If I look around the world, there will always be somebody worse off than me. There will always be somebody better off than me. There will always be somebody who has less than I have. There will always be somebody who has more than I have. There will always be somebody who has a less desirable job than I have. There will always be somebody who has a more desirable job than I have. There will always be somebody who has a paycheck smaller than mine. There will always be somebody who has a paycheck bigger than mine. Quit comparing and classifying yourselves to other people and start putting yourselves up to the judge, up to Jesus, and asking yourself, how does my life compare to his? Quit grumbling against one another. We can stop the ridiculous behaviors that are going on in our world today and in our country by simply learning what the book of James says about how we treat one another. Those are 4 verses. I encourage you to take them to heart, to meditate on them, and to live them out this week.